Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this public information meeting having to do with the Eastern Connecticut Corridor Rail and Transit Feasibility Study. My name is Laura Toole. I'm part of the consultant team working to support the Department of Transportation study. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we have a recorded presentation for everyone. At the end of which we'll have questions and answers, and you will see instructions about how to deal with that in the presentation, which is basically to go into the chat and put in your questions, and that will be moderated. So Elise, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this public meeting for the Eastern Connecticut Corridor Rail and Transit Feasibility Study. We also refer to this as the ECRTS study in short. So you'll hear that acronym tonight. I'm a transportation planner at the Connecticut Department of Transportation in the Office of Policy and Planning, and I'm also the project manager of this study at the Connecticut DOT.
And Jill.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jill Cahoon. I am a transportation planner at AECOM, and I am managing the consultant team, a large team, completing this work. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move into the presentation now, and people will introduce themselves as they come to answer questions. So let's play the presentation for everyone, please.
Hello, everyone. Before we start, we want to go over some housekeeping items, such as this meeting is being recorded. All attendees are muted. There may be a few glitches, so please bear with us. We will address any technical difficulties. Questions may be submitted during or after the presentation for the Zoom webinar live event Q&A window. More information is available on the study website. The comment period is open through October 20th, 2023. For those joining us by computer or web browser, questions may be entered in the Q&A window at any time. The button appears at the bottom of the screen. For those joining us by phone, press Star 9 to raise your hand to be called on during the question and answer session following the presentation. Questions may also be submitted via email. dotplanning@ct.gov. Algunos detalles antes de comenzar. Esta reunión está siendo grabada. Todas las personas están silenciadas. Puede que hayan algunas fallas técnicas, así que tenga paciencia. Abordaremos cualquier dificultad técnica. Las preguntas pueden enviarse durante o después de la presentación. Hay una ventana de preguntas y respuestas disponible durante esta sesión en vivo de Zoom. Hay más información disponible en el sitio web del estudio. El plazo para comentarios está abierto hasta el 20 de octubre del 2023. Para aquellos que se unen a nosotros por computadora o vía la web, las preguntas pueden ingresarse en la ventana de preguntas y respuestas en cualquier momento, en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Para aquellos que se unen a nosotros por teléfono, presione asterisco 9 para levantar la mano y ser llamado durante la sesión de preguntas y respuestas, luego de la presentación. Las preguntas también pueden enviarse por correo electrónico dotplanning@ct.gov. Some of the Zoom features available are the Q&A function, where you can type questions and comments into the Q&A chat, picture right, and the closed captions option. You can select the CC button on your control panel should you wish to view the meeting with closed captions. Funciones de Zoom. Función de preguntas y respuestas. Escriba preguntas y comentarios en el chat de preguntas y respuestas. Vea la foto de la derecha. Subtítulos. Seleccione el botón CC en su panel de control si desea ver la reunión con subtítulos.
In compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, no person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. To find out more about your Title VI rights, visit https://portal.ct.gov/business/office-of-equity/page. You may also scan the QR code shown on the slide to visit the same URL. Following this meeting, we also encourage you to take a voluntary feedback survey so that we can learn more about how to continue improving on our public meetings. To take the survey, please visit https://portal.ct.gov/CTDOT survey. A recording of the formal presentation will be posted to YouTube after the live event. Closed captioning, including non-English translation options, will be available on YouTube. The Connecticut Department of Transportation operates its programs and services without regard to race, color, and national origin in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Any person who believes she or he has been aggrieved by any unlawful discriminatory practice under Title VI may file a complaint with the Connecticut DOT. For more information on the Connecticut DOT's Civil Rights Program and the procedures to file a complaint, contact the Connecticut DOT Title VI Coordinator at 860-594-2169 or visit www.ct.gov//DOT. This slide shows our Title VI notice to the public in Spanish. Once again, I'm Elise Greenberg, the Study Manager from Connecticut DOT's Office of Policy Planning, and I'm joined tonight by Jill Cahoon, the Study Manager from the consultant team at AECOM. We are also joined by others from Connecticut DOT in the Office of Rail and Office of Transit and Ride Sharing that will be available to answer questions during the Q&A session. Thank you for attending this public information meeting regarding the Eastern Connecticut Rail and Transit Feasibility Study, also referred to as the ECRTS. The purpose of this meeting is to present the ECRTS findings and receive questions and comments on these findings. The study team here tonight is aware that there have been recent announcements of temporary service impacts due to construction and also near-term reductions to the regular Shoreline East service. Please be aware that tonight's meeting is focused solely on the findings of the Eastern Connecticut Rail and Transit Study. Public hearings will be conducted in the first week of October regarding the recent communications about Shoreline East. Anyone with questions or comments regarding those announcements or current service changes is encouraged to reach out to dot.proposedtransitchanges@ct.gov. Thank you again for attending tonight's meeting, and we look forward to presenting the ECRTS findings. In tonight's presentation, I'll begin with an overview of the study and then provide an overview of existing conditions in the public transportation market in the study area. I'll then turn it over to Jill Cahoon, who will go over preliminary feasibility assessment strategies, and then go into more detail with corridor and station refinements, service strategies, cost, revenue, and ridership projections, greenhouse gas reduction estimations, and economic benefits. And then I will go over the feasibility study conclusions, and will then turn it into a live question and answer session. The ECRTS study was initiated in early 2022 at the direction of the Connecticut legislature, which directed Connecticut DOT to investigate the feasibility of and market for extending the Shoreline East rail service to the state of Rhode Island, establishing a new passenger rail service from the City of New London to the City of Norwich, establishing a new passenger train station in the town of Groton in Stonington Borough, and extending other ground transportation systems in the eastern region of the state and providing interconnectivity between such systems and rail lines. The ECRTS is a comprehensive data-driven study that examines technical feasibility, including infrastructure and operations, as well as the market for rail and transit service. It is important to note that a feasibility study is the first step in evaluating viability of potential service. Then, depending on the findings, further, increasingly detailed studies and designs may follow. The ECRTS findings include short and long-term strategies for expanded and improved commuter rail and local transit operations in southeastern Connecticut. The study process has been informed by stakeholder and public engagement activities, which I will describe momentarily, the study area's existing conditions, including demographics, employment, major trip generators, travel patterns, and potential for transit-oriented development, and a preliminary feasibility assessment which looked at infrastructure, corridor capacity, and potential station locations. The preliminary feasibility assessment identified key constraints which led to a refined set of rail alignments and station locations for further study, including a look at infrastructure, equipment and service review, ridership forecasts, cost projections, and economic and environmental benefits. Within the ECRTS study area, existing passenger rail service is provided along the Amtrak-owned two-track segment of the Northeast Corridor, or NEC. Amtrak operates intercity Acela service and Northeast Regional service with stations in New London, Mystic, and Westerly within the study area. CT Rail provides Shoreline East commuter rail service from New Haven to New London with connections to Metro North's New Haven line and CT Rail's Hartford line in New Haven. Through its subsidiary, New England Central Railroad, or NECR, DWI owns and operates limited unscheduled freight service on the Palmer Line west of the Thames River and the Norwich Line east of the Thames River, currently operating between 1 and 2 trains per day to meet market demand. Within this study area, there are 21 fixed bus routes, 3 on-demand bus services, 2 intercity bus routes, 4 ferry routes, and bike ped options. Bus transit is largely operated by Southeast Transit District or SEAT. There's also a route operated by Wyndham Regional Transit District and one operated from Ninetown Transit. And at Westerly Station, it is currently served by one bus route and one flex zone operated by RIPTA, or Rhode Island Public Transportation Authority. To better understand the market for public transportation services, we looked at study area characteristics. The study area is characterized by a mix of urban, suburban, and rural communities, with the highest population densities in Norwich, Groton, and New London. These municipalities exhibit higher proportions of ethnic diversity, lower average household income, and increased poverty levels in comparison to their neighbors. These three towns, in addition to Westerly, Rhode Island, also contain census tracts identified as disadvantaged in the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool developed to support the Federal Justice 40 initiative. Tracts are considered disadvantaged when they meet certain thresholds for categories such as climate change, health, housing, legacy pollution, and workforce development. Norwich, Groton, New London, and Montville were also designated in 2022 as distressed municipalities by Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development. These indicators signal that these communities could potentially benefit the most from expanded access to transportation, transit-oriented development, and other growth opportunities. We also looked at travel patterns in the study area and the larger region. These maps focus specifically on people's commuting patterns. In the top map, we're seeing where those who live in the study area go to work. Study area residents largely work in the study area, but there are also concentrations near Hartford and Providence, Rhode Island. In the bottom map, we're seeing where those that work in the study area live. Study area employees largely live within the study area too, but there are also concentrations of those who live in Northeast Connecticut, Rhode Island, and communities directly surrounding the study area. In addition to looking at where people are traveling, we examined traffic volumes to major activity centers. These tourist attractions and major employers include Foxwoods, Groton Submarine Base, Mohegan Sun, Mystic, New London Center, Norwich Center, Pfizer and Electric Boat, Stonington, and Westerly. The study team looked at data from Streetlight, which is a third-party data source that uses information collected from cell phones. This chart shows total volume of average daily trips to these different destinations, showing average weekdays in red, average weekends in green, and average of all days in blue. As you can see, places like Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun show larger traffic volumes on the weekends, and places like Pfizer, Electric Boat, and the Groton Subbase show larger volumes on weekdays. The in-depth evaluation of existing conditions in the study area also involved engagement efforts to supplement the data with feedback from stakeholders and the public. Recognizing the possible expansion of passenger rail service and enhanced transit service could serve many jurisdictions and major destinations, the study team met over the course of the study with the study steering committee and multiple working groups consisting of transit and rail operators, municipal staff and chief elected officials, and customer-focused organizations that have an understanding of the broader needs of diverse communities. Interviews were also conducted with major employers and anchor institutions in the study area. Additionally, the study team conducted public information meetings as well as a public survey last December, and now the final round of public meetings that we are currently engaged in. I'll now turn it over to Jill, who will explain how the existing conditions inform the preliminary feasibility assessment.
Thank you, Elise. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. For this next section, we'll talk through the analyses that comprise the preliminary feasibility assessment and the findings that set the stage for the rest of the study. For the preliminary feasibility assessment, we looked at 3 different rail corridors. That included the Thames River corridor between New London and Norwich, and the Groton Secondary, located off of the Northeast Corridor in the southern part of Groton, as well as the Northeast Corridor from New London to Westerly, Rhode Island. Within the Thames River corridor, we looked at 2 different alignments, one on the west side of the Thames River and the other on the east side of the Thames River. In each of the corridors, we also looked at potential station locations. We divided the corridors into 7 station area zones, and within each zone, we looked at 2 or 3 possible station locations. This includes both the west and the east sides of the Thames River, the Groton Secondary, and potential new station locations along the Northeast Corridor in Groton, Mystic, and Stonington. For each potential station location, we looked at several characteristics to help with the screening of stations to find a preferred station location in each segment. This included site constraints, compatibility with surrounding land uses, market development potential, environmental considerations, transit supportive land use, and operational feasibility. Through the preliminary feasibility assessment, we identified a few primary constraints that had a large impact on the feasibility of options moving east of New London. Any train that moves east of New London would have to cross the Thames River movable bridge. The bridge is open to allow marine traffic to flow through and closed when trains pass. The U.S. Coast Guard determines how long in every hour the bridge can be closed to allow train traffic to pass. So Amtrak and the U.S. Coast Guard have an operating agreement for the bridge. Also, any new commuter rail service for a potential expansion of Shoreline East service, for example, would need to be coordinated both with the existing Amtrak regional and Acela schedules, as well as the future expansion that Amtrak is looking at on their schedules. Another primary constraint is looking at new and alternative station locations along the extensions in either of the corridors, as well as constructing high-level platforms at each station. The high-level platforms are needed for both Americans with Disabilities Act ADA compliance and also to accommodate the M8 equipment that is operated along Shoreline East. And another primary constraint is the storage space, yard space needed for equipment that would be added in order to expand rail service in this region. Understanding these constraints, the corridor capacity analysis showed us that 1 additional train per hour in each direction would be possible across the Thames River Bridge. And in order to keep an alignment in each corridor, we needed to look at the west side of the Thames River at a branch line that would not cross the Thames River movable bridge, and an alignment along the northeast corridor where the largest transit market is located. Along the Thames River corridor, we also looked at intermediate station locations at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and Connecticut College, in Montville near Mohegan Sun, and then in Norwich near the Intermodal Center. Along the Northeast Corridor, we looked at stations in Groton, which is a station location that we called Groton West, a Mystic alternative location because the current Mystic train station used for Amtrak service would not allow for high-level platforms because it's located on a curve. We also looked at a location in Stonington Borough and the existing location used by Amtrak in Westerly. However, the Westerly station would also need to have high-level platforms constructed. The preliminary feasibility assessment also included looking at ground transportation solutions. So looking at both the ground transportation solutions and the potential for rail service in the area coming out of the preliminary feasibility assessment, we identified both shorter-term and longer-term strategies. The shorter term strategies are bus service solutions that are designed to make bus service more frequent, to speed up bus service, make it more direct, and to make connections between major employers, as well as between the major housing areas and major employers. This includes streamlining of bus routes, addition of fixed bus stops, high capacity transit solutions or transit priority solutions on Route 32 between New London and Norwich, and between Groton and Norwich along Route 12. Now, those shorter term strategies or transit strategies could stand by themselves and be the solution. Or in the future, with additional demand, commuter rail service may be possible in the region. What we looked at for commuter rail service strategies are those that I just described a few slides ago, connecting along the Northeast Corridor, New London to Westerly, Rhode Island, and along a branch line between New London and Norwich. In this next section, we'll get into a lot more detail about the corridors, the possible transit and rail strategies, as well as projected costs, revenue, ridership, and greenhouse gas reductions. For this transit service strategies, which again could be the solution for this region, we looked at both fixed route and demand response strategies, as well as infrastructure and policy strategies to improve transit in the region. When looking at the fixed route services, we looked at streamlining services, making service more direct, making service more frequent, and adding transit priority solutions along roadways in order to make transit more attractive. We learned from our customer-focused working group that the directness, speed, and frequency of service are the greatest deterrents to the current network. So in conjunction with the fixed route strategies that we just walked through, we also looked at demand response solutions or microtransit or on-demand strategies as well. Currently, there are on-demand services in New London, Stonington, and there's a flex zone in Westerly for RIPTA. So we looked at expanding the hours of the on-demand services and adding an additional zone where it would be more appropriate to use a demand response solution rather than a fixed route solution. Looking at the fixed route and demand response strategies together, this would be a substantial increase in the amount of service provided in the region. The revenue hours operated every year would be an increase of nearly 53%. We looked at both the bus service as a standalone solution, as well as what the bus network would look like if commuter rail service was extended into the region as well. For our modeling purposes, we use the 2028 year as the horizon year for bus service solutions and 2035 as the horizon year for the rail service solutions. You can see the ridership projections as well as vehicle miles traveled reductions, as well as greenhouse gas reductions associated with these service changes. Additional greenhouse gas reductions are also anticipated as SEAT received a grant to electrify the bus garage, and the state is moving towards electrified bus fleets. We also estimated annual operating cost for these different packages of transit services. For the standalone strategy, it would be an additional $2.5 million per year in order to operate these additional services. When looking at the service strategy that includes the commuter rail solution as well as the bus network, just the bus network component would be an additional $2 million per year in operating expenses. When looking at the demand response strategies, looking at both expanded hours of service as well as the additional microtransit zone, we're looking at an increased cost of $1.5 million a year on top of the existing demand response services. We also estimated the capital costs or one-time costs associated with these transit service strategies. This includes additional vehicles, both buses and demand response vehicles. It includes transit priority solutions like signals, lanes, and roadway configurations, as well as converting from a flag stop system to a fixed stop system in order to improve both access to transit as well as the speed directness of the service. All of these capital improvements together are estimated to cost between $9 and $10 million. Moving on to the longer term strategies or the rail service strategies. For each of the corridors, we looked at both extension of Shoreline East, so that would be extending the service that's coming from New Haven now to the ends of the line, as well as a shuttle service solution, which would only be operated between New London and either Westerly or Norwich. So we looked at both the through service as well as the shuttle service solutions in each of the corridors. In the Thames River corridor along the Palmer line, again on the west side of the Thames River, we also looked at a hybrid solution that most of the time operates as a shuttle between New London and Norwich, with some through trains coming through Shoreline East from New Haven during each day. We looked at both through service and shuttle service solutions in each of these corridors, but determined that the optimal solution would be Shoreline East extension along the main line from New London to Westerly, and branch line or shuttle service along the Palmer line, the west side of the Thames River, between New London and Norwich. Looking at the Shoreline East extension to Westerly, looking at 12 round trips per day on weekdays with a travel time between 22 and 24 minutes. This would require new operating plan for Shoreline East between New London and New Haven, and this also assumes that one through trip to Stamford in the morning and in the afternoon would be restored. This results in an increase in ridership of 159,000 riders per year. On the Thames River corridor along the Palmer line, again the west side of the Thames River, we're looking at 8 northbound and 10 southbound trips per day with a 27-minute trip time, as well as a hybrid solution where 15 of the trips are shuttles and 3 of the trips are Shoreline East extensions or through trips from New Haven through New London to Norwich. And this is looking at an increase in ridership of 126,000 riders per year. We also estimated capital or one-time costs for the rail service strategies. For the Northeast Corridor, the Shoreline East extension, 3 additional stations would be needed, as well as high-level platforms and storage locations, including track to turn trains around, for an estimated costs of $243 million. For the Palmer line, again, the west side of the Thames River, there would need to be substantial track improvements, technology improvements, grade crossing improvements, as well as additional train sets to operate the service for an estimated cost of $636 million. We also estimated annual operating costs for the rail service strategies. Again, these are annual recurring costs using the 2023 June Shoreline East schedule as a baseline. For the Northeast Corridor Shoreline East extension to Westerly, Rhode Island, we're looking at an additional annual cost of $52.3 million. For the shuttle service or hybrid service with some through trips between New London and Norwich, we're looking at an annual operating cost of $33 million. As noted before, with each of these service strategies together between the 2 corridors, we're looking at a potential modeled ridership of 286,000 riders per year. Investments in rail and transit strategies creates opportunities. This includes the shorter-term benefits from creation of jobs associated with constructing the infrastructure, as well as improved access to higher paying jobs for lower income residents. We've talked about in this region how there are a lack of affordable housing options, so making those connections is very important. Additionally, encouraging longer-term transit-oriented development across the underutilized and vacant parcels in the region results in benefits to the communities from property and sales tax revenue. And in the end, pairing transit and rail investment with land use policies that promote density, walkability, and multimodal connectivity maximize return on investment for the region. Earlier in the study, we looked at transit-oriented development potential along the corridors, and then more recently, we looked at the station areas and potential for transit-oriented development. When looking at other cities along the Northeast Corridor, this study area has a lower median income, less job growth, a smaller share of professional jobs, and has seen a smaller improvement in poverty. As we've talked about as well, the study area has a challenge associated with affordable housing. The maps on this slide are really telling. The map on the left shows the multifamily housing supply in each of the station areas that we looked at across the corridors. You can see that each dot represents a multifamily housing option. And then when compared to the map on the right, that map shows, again, for the station areas, those filters out those multifamily housing options that are affordable. And you can see that dot density decreases dramatically when looking at affordable housing options. The Thames River Corridor in particular is a good candidate for transit-oriented development because of that demographic propensity, including housing affordability for needing access to alternative forms of transportation like transit. And there are also 1,000 vacant housing units along the corridor.
Thank you, Jill, for walking us through the study's short-term and long-term strategies. In summary, bus transit strategies could be implemented and could satisfy short-term as well as long-term transportation needs, particularly along the Thames River corridor. In the longer term, rail strategies could be viable, particularly along the Northeast corridor. However, all of these strategies are preliminary findings, and future steps would be needed to advance through the project lifecycle stages. Currently, any next steps are unfunded. As mentioned, a project life cycle has several steps, and a feasibility study is often a preliminary step. The Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, outlines a project life cycle for transit projects that includes a project or systems planning phase, a project development phase, an engineering phase, and a construction phase. Additionally, once a project is constructed, there is ongoing operations and maintenance for the service, infrastructure, and equipment. The project life cycle can take approximately 6 to 20 years to complete, depending on the project. While the findings identified in this feasibility study are presented as a group of short-term and long-term strategies, if one strategy or a combination were to be identified as a viable option upon further study and/or availability of funding, that strategy could move forward independently of the others and be incrementally phased. Each strategy listed could be implemented, if feasible, as an individual project and proceed through the project life cycle stages. The Hartford Rail Line Program, formerly known as the New Haven to Hartford to Springfield Rail Program, or NHHS program, serves as a recent example of an ongoing program developed to launch new rail service in Connecticut. The program advanced via a partnership amongst Connecticut, Massachusetts, Amtrak, and the Federal Railroad Administration following the project life cycle stages shown on the prior slide. The corresponding CT Rail Hartford Line service has required funding from multiple state and federal services and is being implemented using a phased approach for design, construction, and operations. The Hartford line started with a feasibility study in 1994 and moved through the project lifecycle to begin the initial phase of operating in 2018. So what's next for ECRTS? We're currently wrapping up the public meetings that occurred yesterday and today, and the public comment period on the draft final report remains open through October 20th. After October 20th, we will be working to incorporate all the feedback we receive before finalizing the report and submitting it to the Connecticut Legislature by November 30th. The draft final report is available for review on the ECRTS website's document library. The main report intends to serve as a summary of all the supporting technical documentation contained within the 13 appendices A through M. We encourage you to review these draft documents and submit your comments to dotplanning@ct.gov. This concludes our presentation. I will now turn it over to Laura O'Toole, who will be moderating our live question and answer session.
Thank you, Elise and Jill. So let's just go over quickly and once more how you can enter questions, which I'll then read as we go through them. So if you're joining us by computer, there's the Q&A window. It's down at the bottom of the screen, and you can enter questions there. If you're joining us by phone, you just press *9 and then you raise your hand. That raises your hand and you'll be called on to ask your question. And if you'd rather not do either of those things today, you can, even while we're talking, email a question or comment to dotplanning@ct.gov. And I'll just remind everyone that the public comment period is open through October 20th, and you can submit comments and questions to the same email, dotplanning@ct.gov. Leave a message at 860-594-2020. And please always look to the study website to be updated and to leave anything you'd like us to know. So let's take a look and ask this question. Here we go. Why can't the existing Mystic station be used for the operation? And the person who is going to answer that, please put your camera on and unmute yourself. Why, Elise?
Hi, thank you. Elise Greenberg here from Connecticut DOT. Thank you so much for the question. The reason why the current Mystic station would not be able to operate extended commuter rail service from Shoreline East is because Mystic station currently is located on a very sharp curve. Since we are required to have our stations have high-level platforms in order to comply with ADA or Americans with Disability Act regulations, and also to have high-level platforms to be able to continue operating our M8 equipment, we need to have those high-level platforms. We've looked very extensively at different engineering solutions, but there is no way to site a high-level platform at a sharp curve that exists at the current station. So unfortunately, this study had to look at an alternative location in Mystic.
Thanks. I have another one for you, Elise. Why was Lime and East Lime left out of the study area?
Okay, once again, thank you for the question. This study was initiated at the direction of the Connecticut Legislature with the scope of looking at extending existing Shoreline East service. And so that would mean looking at extending the service east of New London as well as north of New London. And so that is why the study area does not include East Lyme or Lyme, because that is currently along the existing Shoreline East service. There was was a separate study done a few years ago looking at a potential station in that area, and that concluded a few years ago. But this specific study is looking at the region east of and north of New London.
Great, thank you. Elise, can you clarify when the study will be absolutely completed?
So we do have a legislative deadline as of to submit this final report to the Connecticut legislature by December 1st. So while the comment period is open until October 20th, we will then be working to finalize the report, and we will be delivering it before December 1st. Our goal is by November 30th.
Okay. And here we go. Here's another one. Why is the rail connection to Worcester? Was curious, is the rail connection to Worcester being considered? The Boston area is so expensive. When I interviewed for a job, I considered living in the Putner, Grosvenordale area and commuting. However, housing is limited there and the rail connection is freight only. I think this area would be perfect for TOD, transit-oriented development, and rail connection to Massachusetts, and draw in those looking for cheaper housing and for those working in the Boston, Worcester metro area. Is this under future consideration? And this one is for Jill.
Hello, thank you so much for your question. As part of this study, we were looking at commuter rail solutions along the Northeast Corridor from New London to Westerly, as well as between along the Thames River between New London and Norwich. As you note, some of the rail lines that go through Norwich, both on the east and the west side of the Thames River, are owned by Genesee and Wyoming. But we were looking at, in particular, commuter rail solutions, which by nature have shorter connection spaces. So those longer distance trips could perhaps be better captured using intercity rail solutions. And there are other studies looking at the intercity rail or regional rail connections. But for this study in particular, we were focused on the commuter rail or the more local scale options within this region. And again, this was a legislatively mandated study. So our scope and our study area was set by that legislation. But there are other studies going on looking into those elements as you note, and we did also acknowledge and receive other intel on folks who are looking for those larger region connections as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich, this one is for you. The plan will increase train traffic with a potential to disturb neighborhoods. In Stonington, there are two private crossings, approximately 300 yards apart. These are the only crossings in the town where train horns sound, causing a severe disturbance to nearby homes. Some Amtrak engineers lean heavily on the horn and blow extended blasts. Some have a lighter and briefer touch. There is clearly room for discretion in style. Will engineers of the new trains be instructed to minimize horn volume and duration? Rich.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Rich Jankovich, Connecticut DOT,
Yes.
Officer Rail Administrator. And thanks for the question. The FRA actually regulates how and when and the frequency, as well as the pattern for the horns when they are coming into crossings with the engineers. So we've had this situation in the past where at the New Canaan, there was some complaints about individual engineers doing it differently. What we could do is inform Amtrak about situations where people think, residents think that there is either excessive horn usage, longer holding the horn down and making that noise for a loud decibel for a longer period known to them. But this is all regulated. The engineers are all trained under the same rules. and guidance that's given by the FRA for safety at crossings, and the notification that they have to use their horns as they proceed through these crossings at each of them in Stonington and elsewhere in the state of Connecticut.
Okay, thank you, Rich. This is for Lisa. Are there any plans on adding transportation options for between Northeast Connecticut, Windham County, to Southeast Connecticut, New London County? People in Northeast Connecticut would benefit from some of the jobs EB, Mohegan, Foxwoods that Southeast Connecticut offers.
Hi, this is Lisa Rivers. I'm the administrator for the Office of Transit and Ride Sharing at Connecticut DOT. So it's a great question. I would be interested in learning more specifics. We already do have a route that runs from Willimantic down Route 32 to the southeast area of the state. We also have a connection with the northeast section of the state now as well through a route Plainfield to Lisbon. We did have conversations with each electric boat about the possibility of express bus service from commuter lots because we had been getting communications that they had a huge influx of employees. So, we talked about the possibility of setting up a system like that. But we have not had any further contact with them. We had talked to them about it, but didn't hear anything back. So, but if you have any more information or more specifics, please let us know, because I would be interested in hearing more.
Okay, thank you. Jill, this is for you. Would an extended rail service to Willimantic and Yukon stores be viable along the G&W? Willimantic is so isolated from the rest of the state.
Thanks for that question. And it's a little bit a partial similar answer to the one that I answered a few minutes ago regarding the possible regional connections to Worcester. So for Willimantic and Yukon stores in that area of the state, the Windham Regional Transit District does provide bus service between Willimantic and this southeast Connecticut region of the state. We did also, as we discussed, look at the regional travel, both within this region and beyond, both in terms of overall travel patterns to major trip generators in this region, as well as overall commuting and travel patterns between this part of the state, as well as over to Woods Hartford, north towards Willimantic, and of course then east to Woods Providence as well. So we did also identify some transportation needs in each of those regions. The same answer holds true. The rail line is owned by Genesee and Wyoming, and the possible regional rail, larger numbers of connections are being considered in other studies beyond this study area. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich, did you want to say something?
No, I'm
Okay.
just ready for the next question. I think I'm up next.
You are. No, actually, Elisa's up next.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. Where
Hello.
the question, Elise, is where exactly are the proposed locations? I'm going to assume that speaks to stations.
That was my assumption as well.
Yeah.
So this study, as Jill mentioned, looked originally at 18 potential locations along all of the corridors that were originally evaluated. While the exact station locations at this time are not identified, that would require a lot more in-depth evaluation and preliminary engineering, and we're not at that point yet with this being the first preliminary step as a feasibility study. We looked at general locations that could be viable, and so we looked at a station along the Thames River corridor on the west side in Norwich, what we were calling Norwich West, which would be right adjacent to the Norwich Transit Center. We looked at a potential station in Montville, going down that line, adjacent to Mohegan Sun. And then we also looked at a potential station in New London, right near the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, as well as Connecticut College. And then along the Northeast corridor, the station locations that we were looking at are what we call Groton West. And then one that would be an alternative to the existing Mystic Station, because as for the reasons I mentioned in the earlier answer to the earlier question, unfortunately, we would not be able to operate at the existing Mystic Station. So we were looking at a station just east, or a potential location just east of the existing Mystic Station, and then also a station in Stonington Borough. So those would be the potential locations along the Northeast corridor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Rich, you're up. The question is, or statement is, I want to believe in and support the rail system, but how is it feasible to expand the railway in this way when riders' most basic and regular means of transportation have been cut? Our trust is strained.
Thank you. And again, I'll respond by the study is a feasibility of a future opportunity. And when we talk about reducing and the reduction of service, in 2 weeks, we will be having our public hearings for that on the shoreline and the New Haven line. And as we identified in the presentation earlier tonight, all folks that want to talk about that should be dialing in or coming to the public hearings in 2 weeks to discuss that in further detail.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, this is for you. Is there a possibility of an express bus to Westerly connection to Shoreline East with stops at the future stations in the short term?
I would say that, that's certainly something we can look into. I would ask Elise what the data showed for the demand for those types of things, but we would have to work with Rhode Island Public Transportation Authority and determine who would operate or what the route would be and what the possible demand would be and then what the fares would be. But yes, it is certainly something we can look into, and I think that's an interesting nearer term option than rail, right?
Okay, thank you. Jill, this is for you. What would average weekday ridership be for each of the Shoreline East plans?
Hello, thank you for that question. We actually projected ridership projections for rail and transit at the annual number, but I did some quick math. So for the Northeast Corridor, a Shoreline East extension, we were looking at an annual ridership increase of about 159,000 riders. That averages out to be about 600 riders a day. Again, with some rounding there and quick math. For the Thames River corridor on the Palmer line, with that hybrid strategy that we were talking about, around 126,000 riders, roughly 500 riders per weekday.
Okay, thanks. Elise, the next two are for you. The first one has a location for the Mystic alternate station been identified? And if so, where is it?
So at this point, we have identified what could be a potential alternative location for the Mystic Station. And what we've identified is just shy, I believe, of about a half of a mile east of the existing Mystic Station, where there is a nice straight section of track where we could site a long enough high-level platform. But again, the exact location of where that potential station could be at this time has not been determined and would need to undergo a lot more further study and preliminary engineering. So that could potentially shift a bit.
Okay, thank you. And the next one for you is, so to be clear, This transit feasibility study advocates bus transit options among the TRC above the construction of rail? Question mark?
If I think I'm interpreting this question correctly, this study is proposing a number of bus transit as well as rail transit strategies, and the bus transit strategies could be implemented much more in the short term than the rail, which would be a much longer term proposition. But what we've found through the study also is that the rail strategy, or I'm sorry, the bus transit strategies that we've included in this study really do satisfy much of the short-term as well as the long-term demand in the region for transportation options. So while the bus could be implemented with rail in the future, it could also be implemented as a standalone option and really satisfy a lot of the region's transportation needs. That being said, rail could potentially be viable in the longer term, but it is something that would take a much larger time frame to implement.
Thank you. Elise, actually, why don't you stay on for a second? Another question is, what are the next chapters and phases for this study, assuming that things keep moving?
So this is the first step. It is a feasibility study. And at this time, there is no funding for any steps beyond this study. But if we were to receive funding, depending on what funding we receive, we could advance through the project lifecycle process. So we could continue to look in much more depth at potential station locations, specific corridor alignments. We can also, on the bus transit side, do another comprehensive service analysis to look specifically more in depth at where routes could satisfy the greatest needs, and how that would also work with the broader region outside of the specific study area. And we could start doing also, again, on the rail side, some preliminary engineering. So, we would have to look a lot more in depth at the strategies that we've identified here. And we would need funding to continue to advance anything is the short answer.
Okay, thanks very much. Drew, this question is for you. What modifications would be needed at New London for through service?
Well, first, Drew Galloway with the consultant team. Thank you for this question. I'm assuming through service in this case, meaning extension of Shoreline East operation along the Northeast Corridor. In that respect, the New London station has only a small amount of modifications that we identified to support it. You have the additional stations that would be in Groton and Stonington and Westerly, and a facility that would enable trains to terminate at Westerly and off of the main high-speed tracks, and then be able to reverse direction and come back would also be part of the facilities necessary for that.
Okay, thanks, Drew. One thing I'll just mention at this time, I believe it's been stated, but just to clarify, the draft final report of the studies anticipated to be completed and delivered to the Connecticut legislature on December 1st. So that's about 6 more weeks, I would think. Okay. I'm looking for another question. And so this public information meeting, we talk about the purpose of it. What's the purpose of this public information meeting? I think we mentioned this before, but it's being held to provide the public and local communities with an overview of the findings and offer the opportunity to ask questions and make comments as we're doing now. So here's another one. Jill, this one is for you. Has a general area or location been identified for the Groton West Station?
Great, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, we have identified an area for the Groton West station. We did look as part of this feasibility study at a location between along Route 1 and Pequannock Road. So that area has a lot of currently commercial areas with some lower density commercial areas, as well as some industrial business going on in that area. There are some underutilized parcels in that region. The rail line is along an embankment in that area, and the town has zoned that area as an enterprise zone for increasing density and multi-use solutions in that region. So for those reasons altogether, that's where we were honing in and looking at a possible station for what we're calling Groton West.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just to put another point on it, the public comment period is open through October 20th of this year, and comments can be provided to the project team via email at capital D, capital O, capital T, lowercase word planning at ct.gov. Elise, this question is for you. Where would a Stonington station be located? Has the study estimated traffic and parking burdens?
Hi, thank you for your question. So as I mentioned, the station locations at this time are fairly conceptual, but in the Stonington borough, we've identified as a potential station location the area right near the Alpha Avenue Bridge Viaduct. This study did not look specifically at a traffic impact analysis. As I mentioned, this is a first step, and there's a lot more study that would need to happen in order to progress anything further. So that is among the set of studies that would have to happen following this one if something were to move forward. So at this point, we have not actually looked at traffic impacts of stations.
Okay. Thank you. Let me just take another look. So we did go over, oh, here we go. Here's another one. Are there any plans to add sidewalks down Route 32? Jill, this is for you. The current path from New London to Norwich stops having sidewalks at the New London line. There are limited sidewalks in Waterford and Montville. This is a state road, and there is a lot of pedestrian traffic. When it is dark, Route 32 is very dangerous. What can the citizens do to make their commute safer?
Thank you for the question. Unrelated to this study, the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments, SCOG, did just complete a Route 32 study that looked at roadway improvements and safety improvements, including sidewalks along that roadway. So I might suggest you look into that as well. Additionally, when we were looking at possible transit priority solutions along Route 32 and along Route 12 as well, and other places in the region, in order to safely find ways to give priority to transit and to speed up buses, we do, of course, look at access to that service, including safe pedestrian, bicycle, and active transportation solutions. And we did include roadway improvements and roadway modifications in order to allow for bus priority and those associated transit service solutions in our strategies. So that's kind of a two-part answer, and it's a big team effort to come at this and look at these solutions from different angles. So thank you.
Thank you. And another point of clarification, if you're looking for some rainy day reading. You can find more information, including the document library, on the study's website, which is portal.ct.gov/eastern-ct-rail. And that will give you the minutes of the public information meetings. This document, as well as the appendices that you saw a list of them on a slide earlier that go into it much more in depth on those specific topics. Okay, let's see. I'm just waiting for another question. And I know they're there. Okay, hold on a minute. Okay, what would, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to move this. What would, this is for Jill and Lisa. What would bus rail connections look like at each of the stations? Would there be timed connections, and would the stations be designed more like Old Saybrook or the intermediate Shoreline East stations?
Thank you for that question. I'll get us started, and then Lisa can jump in as well. What we looked at each of the rail stations were existing transit connections, both fixed route and demand response connections and strategies. And the strategies that we looked into, both as standalone bus solutions as well as connectivity to rail stations. We're not to the point of, this is a feasibility study, we're not to the point of actually putting together the schedules, but the idea would be to have seamless connections whenever possible in order to make those connections really useful for patrons, but we didn't get to that level in this particular study. Lisa, do you have any more to add?
Just that, ideally we would try to have those timed connections that you're talking about. Sometimes that can be challenging because those rail people, they change their schedules all the time. And then we have to change our buses to try and match them. But one of the ways that we've done this in a couple of areas is with that on-demand microtransit, as we call it. So when you know you're going to be arriving at the station, you can reach out and request a ride. And we can direct a vehicle over to you to pick you up and provide that last mile connection.
Okay, great, thank you. And another question for you, Elise. Does CTDOT need any kind of supporting letters from cities included in plans at this point? I am sure Norwich will have positive impact.
Sorry, just had to unmute myself. Thank you so much for your question. At this point in the process, what would be most helpful for us, since we're in our public comment period, we are seeking public comments and questions specifically on the findings of this study, so that we can take that feedback and be able to incorporate it as we work to finalize the report, so that we can get as best of a report to the Connecticut legislature for their review. If you would like to advocate, though, for this potential additional service, you can work through with your elected officials to do that. But for us at the DOT, we're looking for specific feedback on these findings. That way we can also give that as information and a data-driven report to the legislature.
Okay. Thanks. And Elise, maybe you'd like to speak for a moment about why, in general, rail and transit expansion is being considered in the region, given density and employers and marketing tourism. Elisa, I'm sorry, did you
Sorry.
hear me?
Yes, I can. I think I just
Okay.
had to get myself off mute again. For all those reasons that you mentioned, there are a lot of major employers in the region, and there are a lot of tourist destinations as well as other types of recreational assets. And so we wanted to be able to look at, those as potential trip generators, but also, as mentioned, there are socio-demographic indicators in the region that signal to us that, there is a very great need for transportation options that would generate economic growth in the region and greater opportunities. And specifically, we've seen that in this study on the bus transit side. And enhanced bus transit could really meet the needs of a lot of the population that lives in this area.
Great, thanks. Jill, I have 2 questions for you. So when you finish the first, please stay on. Are there any plans to increase the number of Amtrak trains stopping at Westerly, Mystic, New London, or Old Saybrook, and expanding the cross honoring program?
So their Amtrak does have plans to expand their service in this region. When we were conducting our corridor capacity analysis, we did include those additional trains that they plan on operating within this region. So we use their C37 plans for expansion in the region. So yes, is the short answer to that question.
Okay. And the next question for you is, what methods of data collection regarding possible ridership were used for this study?
Sure. So in order to estimate or project ridership for this study, we did use a travel demand model in order to make ridership projections. We looked at both population and employment projections. We also collected information from each of the communities within the study area about their development plans. And we also talked, as Elise mentioned, with anchor institutions and major employers to collect information on anticipated changes, increases in the number of jobs, changes to each of the anchor institutions that may have an impact on ridership, and used those elements in the transportation demand model to estimate ridership.
Great, thank you very much. Lisa, this is for you. By on-demand microtransit, are you referring to something similar to Uber, but the vehicles would be part of the CT Department of Transportation?
What I'm referring to is like if you think Uber, but then you apply the rules of public transit to it. So the vehicles would be accessible to people with disabilities. The cost per trip, you wouldn't have any surge pricing. You'd have more of a public transportation style fare. You could arrange to get a ride on the app on your phone, or you could call in to the dispatch center to request a ride. So it's a much more public transit way of approaching the on-demand ride requests.
Great, thank you. Do we have any more questions in the queue? I'm getting that answer in 1 second.
Laura, there is a question about upgrades to existing bus stations along the TRC.
Okay.
It says most stations
Can you
are not
explain what
covered normally.
TRC, Lisa, can you explain what TRC is? I don't know if everybody.
I do not know. I apologize, but that's the question
Well,
in the
me
chat
either.
there.
Who knows the answer to that? Drew?
So I guess my
Yeah.
response is
Laura, I'll suggest that TRC is the Thames River Corridor.
Oh my gosh,
Thank you.
that's so embarrassing. Lisa, can you answer that question?
Yes, we are rolling out a bus stop enhancement program statewide, and that would include things like bus shelters. It would include better access from the intersection, so sidewalks, curb cuts, benches, lighting, real-time information, depending on, how much ridership there is in the area. There's more and more amenities that can be added to it. So we should have a shovel in the ground for our first bus stop coming in the spring.
Right. Okay, here's another question. It's for you, Elise. Given that Shoreline East service appears to be currently in a death spiral, does the panel believe that the extension of that service is realistically ever going to come to fruition?
Thank you for that part comment, part question. This study is taking a look at rail in a longer term vision, since it would take a lengthy amount of time to implement any rail strategies. What is currently happening with Shoreline East existing service is result of a biennial budget process. So that is the budget is revisited every 2 years. The proposed reductions are a near-term thing that's happening, but that doesn't mean that in future budget processes that won't change. This study is a feasibility study. Everything does start with a feasibility study. So in the longer term, rail could be viable.
Thank you. Jill, this is for you. Does the study include proposed improvements to 643?
Thanks for the question. We believe that's referring to the River Valley 643 bus from New London to Old Saybrook. And what we were are primarily the transit strategies that we are including in this particular study pertain to SEAT, Southeast Area Transit District routes, which is the primary service provider within this study area. So we looked at modifications to SEAT's routes and SEAT's services, but we did look at connectivity to other regional services, such as the River Valley Wyndham Regional Transit District and RIPTA services. So we looked at it from a connectivity standpoint, but not looking at changes to the routes in the neighboring transit agencies district.
Thank you. And I'll ask again if there are more questions in the queue, or if we're nearing the end. Okay. Megan, can you give me a sense of what we have? Okay, there's another question. Is this proposal something the legislature still needs to vote on, or has it already been approved for lease?
Thank you for your question. At this point, the only piece of legislation that was passed was for this feasibility study to occur. This at this point is just a feasibility study where we have identified a set of rail strategies as well as bus transit strategies that could be viable to serve transportation needs in this region. After this point, this final report is going to be delivered to the legislature by November 30th, and it is a data-driven document that is it lends itself for decisions to be made, but at this point, no decisions beyond the study have been made.
Okay, thank you. Another question for Jill. Have there been any studies, or have any studies taken place about extending MBTA, the Massachusetts system, to Westerly?
Hello, thank you. Thank you for the question. So the service in Rhode Island, the commuter rail service is operated by Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, MBTA, with stops through to Tucket Central Falls, Providence, TF Green, and Wickford Junction. There have been some studies, again, not related at all to this study, but the Rhode Island Department of Transportation has done some studies with the MBTA to look at potential expansion. There's also an intercity rail from New Haven to Providence with Amtrak that is currently going on as well. So there are a lot of studies that have been done adjacent to this study as well, and that are ongoing now that are looking at potential overlay or connections in adjacent systems. So yes, there's a lot going on with different studies about rail in this region.
Jill, could you stay on? I was thinking it might be useful. There are a number of studies that you paid attention to while this study was going on and had, meetings with people who were conducting those other studies. Can you mention a couple of them?
Sure, yes. So at the same time as this study has been going on, there has also been the I-95 East Planning and Environmental Linkages study, the PEL study, looking at a longer distance of I-95, but through southeastern Connecticut. So we did coordinate with that study. We also, for the potential rail station location in Stonington is near the Alpha Avenue Bridge, which is being replaced through a different project. So we did through Connecticut Department of Transportation. So we did also coordinate with that design team to understand what their plans were for that particular bridge. Those are just a couple. There are some others as well. We also did an extensive review of previous studies, including for each of the communities, plans of conservation and development in each of the communities. We also looked at previous studies conducted by SEAT, the Southeast Area Transit District, as well as the statewide transit plan and other state rail plan, other components, both local, regional, and statewide, to get a really good grasp on the breadth of the work that's been completed in this region, both at this local region and the larger region as well.
Thanks, Jill. I think that's helps set more of a context as well. Okay, let's see. So if it hasn't been clear already, another point of clarification that this study obviously is being led by CTDOT, but it's the Bureau of Policy and Planning, supported by a team of consultants, and we've all been working together for about 1.5 to 2 years now on this effort. And I see that there's another question coming up. I almost have it. Okay, this is for Elise. Would Amtrak partner with CTDOT to create a new Mystic station? They have to deal with the same issues, though they are able to board on lower platforms. If this hasn't been discussed with Amtrak, is there a plan to discuss this option with them as the study progresses? As for Elise.
Thank you for your question. At this time, so Amtrak was a member of our rail working group. Our rail working group consisted of all of the owners and operators of the lines in the study area. At this point, we haven't had any discussions about potential partnerships or looking into the alternate Mystic station directly with them. However, that is a potential option. We would have to have, if any of this were to move forward along the Northeast Corridor, we would have to have a number of discussions with Amtrak, since this is all their right of way to move anything forward. So that is definitely a potential for there to be discussions with Amtrak about the Mystic Station.
Okay. Lisa and Jill, this is for the two of you. Does the plan call for more frequent service for bus 11, which is the only route to go through Groton City?
So I can speak to some improvements that are going to be happening in the Southeast Area Transit District bus system sometime soon. We have funding in the budget for them to expand service, and that would include expanding the hours of service on Route 11 in Groton. I can put you in touch with the Southeast Area Transit District to get more details about that proposal if you would like more. But Jill, can you answer the question about more frequent service?
Yes. So for Route 11, specifically, the short answer is yes, but also the larger strategies in general, the answer is also yes. So right now, the seat bus service operates about every hour or every 2 hours, and the strategies look to try to get the routes running at least every half an hour. Instead, expand those evening hours, add the Sunday service, like Lisa just mentioned. Additionally, in Groton, we also looked at the possibility of having some microtransit solutions in Groton as well, having a zone in Groton, which would also cover the city area. So there could be potential both connections between microtransit and fixed routes, but also that could be, an extended solution within that region.
Thank you. I think there are some more questions that are about to come through. And just trying to think of, oh, here we go. How easy would it, this is for Drew and or Rich. How easy would it be to restore Stamford through service?
I think it's probably more appropriate for Rich to respond. There's two parts to it. I'll talk about one part of it, and the two aspects are physical or operational, and then the other is financial. And on the physical components of it, it's a matter of having enough equipment to extend trains to Stamford. This is Shoreline East, I would believe we're talking about, because the extensions change the equipment programming and cycles between the trains, and that would require additional equipment to add it. It also requires then additional train crews to provide it and make sure that physically there are scheduled paths or slots along the New Haven line into Stamford to accommodate that. So on the physical side, you'd have to make sure that there is adequate equipment ready for it and provided for that. And then the other aspect is the financial side. As I said, I think Rich is probably better suited to answer that question.
Thank you, Drew.
Thanks. So adding on to what you had just mentioned, we are negotiating and discussing this with Metro at this time. There's nothing we can report out on because of the financial aspect of it. Again, we are in 2 weeks going to be talking publicly about our reductions, both on the Shoreline and on the New Haven line. But this particular train, as restoring it, is something that we'd like to work on and work with Metro North. So I'd like to leave it as further discussions, and with Metro North are ongoing, and hopefully we can report out later this fall.
Thank you, Rich. I think we still have some more questions to answer. Rich, when you talked about the public meetings that are happening about Shoreline East and other issues, what dates are those? Do you know?
Yes. Let me just look over my shoulder here at the calendar. So we are scheduling or have scheduled for October 2nd and 3rd.
Mhm,
That is a Monday and Tuesday,
mhm.
and virtual on Wednesday, the 4th. I might be able, if I can switch screens real quickly, Laura, grab more details because I think I have something here. So let me just, or I
Okay.
can come back to you in a second or two with maybe
Yeah,
a little more detail.
I have a couple questions for
Okay.
Drew, so
Yep.
we can pull that in after that.
Yep.
Drew,
Let me
are you ready?
shut down
Let's
my
go.
screen.
You're ready, Drew?
I am.
Okay. Why would an extra locomotive need to be purchased if there are now extra push-pull sets available with the replacement of diesels on Shoreline East?
It's some of this is a matter of timing. In our analysis, we were using assumptions on equipment utilization that was a continuation of the push-pull equipment that used to operate on Shoreline East.
Mhm.
And it is Connecticut's policy to have a sufficient number of locomotives that can be either called in spare or available for additional service as part of the overall fleet. And we included in this calculation enough to provide for those margins. There was also the switch, as was mentioned, using the M8 self-propelled multiple unit equipment. And that has its own set of margins and allowances for equipment maintenance and protection that would be included. We elected to continue with the push-pull option for purposes of developing high-level feasible costs, operational costs of this. Either way, whichever it goes, there would still be the principles behind it of having enough of the motive power capability that you can provide some reliability and redundancy.
Okay, here's another question that is about push-pull sets. Has the possibility of a short-term service with 1 or 2 round trips during rush hour been considered, with trains stopping at Westerly, Mystic, and running through to Shoreline East using push-pull sets?
We looked at and evaluated service of that type, and it was somewhat agnostic to the type of equipment. It assumed that you could have equipment that could operate either electrically or under diesel, and technology exists that provides that type of capability. But the Shoreline East extension, that up the Northeast Corridor to Westerly, and some of the scenarios that were evaluated along the Thames River corridor to Norwich did include a through service that would have carried through from New London westward towards Old Saybrook and then eventually New Haven.
Great. Drew, before you get off, could you, I know your full name is Drew Galloway, could you explain your role on the project and where you're from? What?
Sure. My name is Drew Galloway. I'm with the consultant team. And my role in this process has been the development of the different service scenarios and operational aspects of the study, and bringing them to a point that then they can inform and advise the other aspects of the study, looking at such things as ridership, forecasting and projections, or environmental impacts, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Rich, did you track down more information?
Absolutely. For you, Laura, I've got it all. So here's what I said earlier. I'll give you some more details now. Monday, October 2nd, on October, this coming couple weeks from now, will be at the Kennedy Mitchell Hall of Records in New Haven, 200 Orange Street. We'll have an open house from 5 to 6 p.m. and we'll have the actual hearing from 6 to 8 p.m. Tuesday, the 3rd of October, will be in Hartford at the Capital Region Council of Governments. That'll be on the 3rd floor. That's 241 Main Street. Again, an open house from 5 to 6, where we'll have boards like we've had with our presentation in person here. So we'll have a bunch of boards to lay out the schedules and talking points. And then 6 to 8 o'clock will be the actual public hearing. And then Wednesday will be 2 virtuals, as I said, 11 to 1 p.m. and 8 to 9 p.m. And we'll be on our website. All this information is available if folks want to go to the website and either click on the press release or pull this down.
And do people need to register for the virtual sessions? Or can they just? But that will be
cannot
on the
confirm that.
website.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah.
on the website.
Or I
Okay,
can get you that, Laura, too, because I can reach out later.
all right, that's fine, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I see another question is about to become clear. Dave Elder, this is for you. Won't our current rail lines along the shoreline be underwater shortly?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
It's a little more. I've traveled this route often and have experienced areas that appear very close to the water. Is there any concern that additional traffic will add to the erosion on the shoreline?
So we live in a coastal area, and we do work closely with our partners, our federal agency partners. We also work closely with some of our research institutions. UConn has prepared some sea level rise estimates that we use. We also do work, all of our hydraulics and drainage analyses do consider future rainfall projections as well as sea level rise. And living in a coastal area, working with transportation assets in a coastal area, we do design for generally a service life or a useful life of an asset could be upwards of 50 to 75 years. So we definitely do consider whether or not we're going to have increased sea level rise. The shoreline east in particular is definitely right along the coast. It's something we have to manage. We are aware of it, shortly, I think, is a relative term. Some of the projections we have go out 25, 50 years, but we do consider those when we go to replace our infrastructure. And it's not just on our rail infrastructure as well. It's our roads, bridges, and it is something we consider in our design. But it's something we have to manage as being a state with coastal transportation assets. So Connecticut's not unique to that. And, we do work with the best projections that we can. And we work closely with other federal agencies and state agencies to figure out what those projections are when we design something.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Rich, one last thing for the record. Could you just tell everyone your last name, your title? And
Yep, I'm sorry. Rich Jankovich, Rail Administrator for the Connecticut Department of Transportation.
Perfect, thank you. Here's another question for Jill. Do the projected ridership numbers include travel to and from intermediate shoreline east stations and the decreased ridership due to COVID?
Yes, looking at the ridership changes historically, we did use pre-COVID numbers as a baseline to understand what that demand looked like. We also then used the more recent ridership figures, which of course have been decreased due to COVID. So we considered both pre and post-COVID in our ridership modeling numbers. We also did look as far as traveling to and from intermediate stations. Yes, we did look at both the shuttle and the through service options when projecting ridership. So for each of the corridors, we did look at both through trains service models as well as shuttle service models, and did project ridership for each of those different scenarios as we were working through this analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think another question is about to appear. What, this is Jill for the first half for you, and then maybe Rich, if you feel like you can handle this second question, I'm sure you can handle it. You can take that. So Jill, what would weekend service look like?
So for the rail service options, we are looking at commuter rail service. We modeled weekday only service to start. So that is looking at weekday service. We did look at both weekday and weekend service for the bus service options.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, would M8s be equipped to accommodate bikes?
Yes, they are. They are currently equipped now to handle bikes. It's up to 4 bikes per individual car. They're paired, so they're a married pair, A and B cars. So it would be a set of 2 that would carry up to 4 bikes.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I think we've already gone over, pretty well what the next steps are after this is submitted to the legislature, what the next step would be as things move forward in terms of further studies that would need to be funded. Oh, I thought I was having a question come through. Nope, not yet. Okay. Let's go to the raised hands. Kit Hartford has a raised hand. If you could ask your question, please. Kit Hartford, do you know how to unmute yourself so that you can ask your question? Okay, who is the next person with a raised hand? Let's see. Let me take a look. Oh, Commissioner Euclideo, Garrett Euclideo, would you like to say something? Hello? You need to unmute yourself. I'm still seeing a mute sign next to both Garrett and Kit Hartford. I am not sure how to fix this for you both because I think you need to find a way to unmute yourselves. Maybe I have to unmute you. Let me see. I apologize. Oh, I think you're both unmuted. Kit Hartford, you have to do it. All right, well, I'm so sorry that we can't get that done right now. Maybe your voice, as soon as you manage to unmute yourselves, please just speak up. I was trying to. It's the bottom left of your screen is the unmute button. And if that's not working as you try and do it, could you please just go to the Q&A chat if you're able, or to the regular chat and just tell us. Oh, okay. Kit Hartford. If you want to put your question in the chat, that would be fine. We'll get it. Okay. I think we'll see if there are any questions left. Okay, we have answered all the questions that we have. I'm sorry, Kit Hartford, that we weren't able to get to you, but please go to the website and enter your question, or we also have right here on this screen the ways that everyone can get in touch with us, and certainly we'll be looking for you to email dotplanning@ct.gov, or you can leave a voicemail at 860-594-2020. And you can certainly take a look at the study website and let us know what you think. Thank you, everyone, for participating this evening and giving us so much food for thought and such great input, which will be incorporated into our final report. And we wish you all a very good rest of the evening. And please, make sure that you're in touch with us. I think we have most of you, if not all of you, on our list for updates. Particularly, I see a few people who were at the meeting this afternoon or last night. And it's great that we will have you from the sign-in sheets as well. So I'm prepared to say thank you and good night, unless anybody else from CTDOT has anything to say. Elise?
I just want to echo your comments. Thank you so much, everyone, for your great questions. This was our third of a set of 3 different meetings on this study, and we've had very good attendance, very good comments, very good questions. So it's great to see so much enthusiasm and support for this study. And just to remind everyone, we still are within the public comment period through October 20th. So if you think of anything else, please share your comments to dotplanning@ct.gov. But thank you, everyone, so much, and have a great night.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.